Good morning, Facebook. Good morning, YouTube, Instagram. Welcome. I'm just going to wait for you guys to tune in. Welcome in. Welcome, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hope you guys had a good weekend and that you enjoyed the Super Bowl or the Super Bowl halftime performance, which I personally loved a lot. Um, Good morning. I don't have a lot of time today, but I want to talk about trafficking. So I'm just going to jump right into it because I want to get as much of the information out as possible. Good morning to all. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Aisha Chidole. I'm an immigration attorney. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. I represent clients in all 50 states in the United States with their family and humanitarian immigration matter. We specialize in, humanitarian cases, family cases, complex RFEs, NOIDs, immigration history, appeals, waivers, and all of that good stuff. Let me see if I can add a collaborator on here. If any of you know how to add a collaborator, let me know. I always try to add a collaborator, but I just can't figure out how to do it. Let's see. Let me try my luck right now. Just give me a second, guys. All right, let's see if this works. Invite. Okay, let's see if that works. Thank you, Efe. Appreciate it. Um, Let me put my phone number here real quick, and then I'm just going to jump right into it. Last week we talked about, elements and benefits of a valid case, and prior to that, I talked about good faith marriage. So I'm just going to start deep diving into immigration topics and different ways in which you can legalize your status. And ways that people don't know about, because a lot of times people think that marriage is the only way or the only route, if they've overstayed, but there are other routes, and I'll give you guys some kind of examples to help you understand. Okay, so I've just pinned my number. Okay, so elements of a T visa. What else do we know? T visas. A T visa is also a trafficking visa. It stands for T, stands for trafficking, and so understand this. T visa is a form of immigration protection for survivors of human trafficking, right? So that it is not asylum. It is not VAWA. It is not a crime-based green card. It's specifically tied to human trafficking. So to get to the heart of what human trafficking is when it relates to immigration, think about it this way. Trafficking, it's not the same as smuggling, right? It's not the same as being kidnapped. It's not the same as it doesn't require that you're kidnapped or that you're doesn't require you to cross the border. Trafficking can happen in someone's house, a restaurant, a farm, a nail salon, a hair salon, a hotel, a strip club, a construction site, or even in romantic relationships. And there are two types of trafficking cases: labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Labor trafficking is usually forced work through threats, coercion, debt, like if you owed money or they told you owed money, or control. And sex trafficking, of course, is commercial sex induced by force, fraud, or coercion. If you are a minor, then, coercion, of course, is not a requirement. One key element that you have to know with force, fraud, or coercion is this. If you think about force, you want to think about violence, you want to think about threats, you want to think about confinement. And I'll talk about what confinement looks like because I think knowing the examples really help people understand. And then fraud is going to be things like lies about a job, lies about your pay, lies about, oh, I'm going to help you get papers, or even lies in a relationship, like if you're in a domestic relationship. And then coercion are things like blackmail, debt, threat, immigration threats, isolation, taking your documents, holding onto your documents, controlling your money, or even threats to children. So, it's not like someone, it's not like someone is like holding you or locking you up in a room. A lot of times it's a control that stops you from being set free. And the other element is that you have to show that your physical presence in the United States is as a result of the trafficking. So you must be in the US because of the trafficking, or because you're helping with the investigation or prosecution of the trafficking. So, and a lot of times you might have entered not knowing that you were being trafficked, or you didn't enter trafficked but remained in the US because of the trafficking, because of fear, control. You have nowhere to go. I would talk a lot about our demographics of majority of the people here, and some examples that we've seen of trafficking, that we've had success with. I'm sure all of you can probably think of that one aunt or uncle or cousin or relative that maybe told your mother or your father, oh, send your daughter or send your son over. I will take care of them, or I will put them in school, just let them get their visa. They come in here and I'll take care of it. And then the person arrives into the United States, and all of a sudden you turn them into an unpaid live-in nanny. This happens a lot. This happens a lot in the African community, right? So that's why I want you guys to listen, because a lot of times, people think trafficking is just crossing the border. It is not. So this is a very common one, and that's why I'm talking about it. And we've had many clients in this situation that we've gotten their T visas because of it. They send you here, and they claim they're sending you to school, or they're going to make sure that you're good. And what ends up happening, they either put you in the house and they make you a nanny for their children, and tell you that you're not allowed to communicate with anybody. You're not allowed to go to school. If you don't do this, I'm not going to put in your application for you to go to school. They don't pay you for taking care of the children. That's the children that, they brought you here for. They're telling your family something else, because most times your family is probably like a relative or like a close family friend, but they know that they cannot file any petition for you. And then they threaten you. Like, we've had cases where you're not even allowed to be on social media because they don't even want people to know that you're in the household. You're not allowed to leave the household, and if you're leaving the household, you're walking like to the grocery store and go there and come right back, or they force you into some sort of business that they have, where you're working because you don't have any papers. You're working under the conditions that they've asked you to work, whether that's like in a home health care, in a nursing home, whether that's in a church. So a lot of examples I'm giving are what we see that are very common, right, in those situations, right? And a lot of times, depending on, where you're from, there's a lot of threat of shame and how they will disgrace you and blackmail you, or say, oh, you're wayward, you're loose. I'm going to tell everybody all these things about you, that all you want is boys, all you want is girls or women. And so therefore you're stuck there because you don't have any money, any work that you're doing for them. I'm laughing, but it's actually not funny. Like, I'm laughing to say how crazy it is. Any work that you're doing for them, they're not paying you. They've threatened you that, oh, you don't have status. So, if you want to leave, watch and see what's going to happen. I will call ICE, on your behalf. And so for a lot of people, they're stuck there because they don't have the financial liberty to remove themselves from the situation, number one. Number two, there's truly that fear of ICE. And then the other thing, a lot of times people in this scenario, those family that they go and stay with, those people usually are holding on to their legal documents, like their passports, their IDs. Babatunde says, I'm laughing the same. This is deep. Yeah, it's really happening, in the African and Caribbean community. And, it's crazy because, the more of it I see, you just see a common thread. And, I'm sure each and every one of us can identify like a friend or a family member that we know kind of went through this, so that is an example of where you wouldn't even know that you're being trafficked, right? That is a form of trafficking. You just think, they brought you here, or they paid for your ticket to come here. And that means that. Another example, would be things where, let's say you're working, like some, and this happens especially in the Caribbean community, where they basically tell them, oh, come here to work, we'll put you in hospitality, we'll make sure we take care of your H-2B, your work visa when you get in here. We're going to pay you, maybe let's just say $12 an hour or whatever it is. And then you get into the country, and once you get into the country, some random person comes pick you up from the airport. So, you've sold everything back home and everywhere because you think that, you're going to start a job here. And sometimes these people come with their family. Like, so husband quits job, children are removed from school, and all of them are coming because they think they're coming for a better life. And because they've told them, oh, no, I can get you a job. And then you're going to get your, work visa, whatever it is. And they come in here and they find themselves in a room with like 20 other people. Like, so you're living in a household, like you're packed in there like sardine, with like 20 people in a 2-bedroom. You have no privacy. The fridge is all of you sharing the fridge. They come to pick you guys up on the bus or something like that for work. You're not allowed to leave, so. And then they actually don't even pay you what they pay you for, or they continue to tell you, we'll do it, we'll file for you, but they don't file for you, but they threaten you, they don't give you any days off. They tell you, you see so many people that when you do the calculation of what they're being paid, like, so if they say, oh, they're working like 80 hours a week, right, doing like that home health care or nurse's aid or whatever it is. And in those 80 hours, let's say they're paying them, I don't know, like in a month, they pay them like $500. Once you do the math, that is way less than minimum wage. And for a lot of people, they stay in that because what is their alternative? For those people, they were literally induced by fraud to come into the United States and promise that they would work. And for those people, all they're going to be thinking about is, man, I had my husband, or I just had my wife uproot their lives as well. I just had my children uproot their lives as well, and then they're here. And so you find yourself in that situation and you can't escape. So, so those are some examples. There are many, and then I can also even talk about like relationships, like when you're in personal relationships with people. A lot of times, in relationships, part of the person that's trafficking you is your boyfriend or your spouse, who is essentially acting as a pimp towards you, and tells you that you must go and work and give them all the money. And then they allocate how it goes and tells you, where do you think you're going? Where are you going to go? Or they don't want to marry you, even though they have status. But instead, they need to do it this way so that they can control you. And you're forced to stay in that because of, again, reputational harm, what they're going to say about you. Sometimes they will go on Facebook and start talking about you, posting about you. I see people here saying that this is a story of their life, and that's really, really sad. So, and I saw someone asking, what do you do if you're in this situation? If you're in this situation, you should contact an attorney, okay? One of the requirements for trafficking is that you have to be willing to work with law enforcement. You have to be willing to speak with someone in law enforcement to let them know this is what happened and allow them to investigate it. And if you're able to do that, and you meet all these elements, which I'll talk about the final element, law enforcement is, of course, one of the requirements, cooperation with law enforcement. There are some exceptions for certain people, depending on, depending on trauma. And a lot of times trauma will relate to if you're a minor, where you don't have to work with law enforcement, or if the trafficker is your parent. Right? A lot of people have trauma with that. If the trafficker is your parent, believe it or not, some people's parents traffic them, and force them to do these things here and tell them that's the only way that they can survive and stay here, even though they don't do it. So if you fall into any of those categories, someone's asking which kind of attorney. This is an immigration, trafficking is immigration. So, we handle immigration cases, on T cases. So we're happy to screen you and let you know if you're eligible for it. and we go through the different options for trafficking, there are a lot of benefits that come with getting a T visa, which I'll talk about in my next post. Today, I just wanted to kind of talk about the elements and just take questions. But it overcomes a lot of things. Like if you're someone that had, you entered without inspection, if you've had any certain misrepresentations, if you are someone who has had a false claim to citizenship, these are things that you can come under. And, with trafficking, it covers quite a large part of your family. So if you get approved, certain members of your family get approved as well, which we'll go into next week. But the final requirement of trafficking is extreme hardship. And so you need to show that your hardship is unusual and severe, like meaning what will happen to you should they deport you is extreme. Like your hardship is going to be extreme because of the trafficking. So I'm running through again, what are the requirements? You got to show force, fraud, or coercion. You got to show, physical presence in the United States, and which resulted because of the trafficking, or you're here continuously because you want the trafficking to be investigated. You want to show cooperation with law enforcement, and then you want to show extreme hardship. With law enforcement, at our firm, we help you do the reporting, because a lot of times people don't know who to report to, what department to report to. So we do the reporting for you and draft, what, your testimony and what it is that you're reporting for. And so that's that on trafficking. Let me take some questions. I am shocked at the amount of people on here saying that this is something that they experience, which is really sad. As you see, there's so many people that experience this, and they just don't even realize, because they don't know that this is an option for them. And this is applicable to you regardless of how you entered into the United States, regardless of whether or not you're married to a US citizen or a green card holder. You can be single and still be a victim of trafficking, okay? And then for like a lot of our clients from the Philippines, we see a lot of sex trafficking with them, and domestic partner trafficking, where they basically bring them in as almost like a mail order bride, and begin to do or tell them they're bringing them in to take care of them, and then turn them into a commercial sex slave, basically. Okay, so let me take some questions before I jump off. Good morning. Is it okay to contact your Congress personnel if your marriage-based green card is pending for almost 3 years? It's in Jacksonville field office. Yes, you should contact them. Marriage-based after 3 years is usually considered a long time, barring no issue. Usually, obviously, it means that either your file has been forgotten or you're in the fraud investigation territory. So this is definitely a good time to reach out to them. If your extreme cruelty hardship petition meets all circumstances and exceeds the standards, USCIS will approve your case and waive the interview. It's hard to say who USCIS waives interviews for or doesn't waive interview. Any application you send, you should automatically imagine that you will be attending an interview unless you receive an interview bypass. But generally, in this administration, interviews are not generally waived. On some 751s they do, but just always imagine that you'll be scheduled for an interview, and if you're not, then great. How long to receive a BFD after the biometrics for a T visa? So not everybody receives a bona fide determination for a trafficking visa, and not receiving it, them telling you that you don't have a bona fide determination does not mean your case will not be approved, because we've seen it both ways, where they weren't eligible for a bona fide determination, but their T visa was eventually approved. Because oftentimes, when they say you're not eligible for a bona fide determination, they're saying based on the surface, right? Just like in a VAWA case where they're looking at a prima facie determination. So instead, they're taking more of a deep dive into your application to determine eligibility, as opposed to just a surface one. If you do get a bona fide determination, and you applied for a work permit, then you're able to get a work permit with that. For a good number of people, it's really hard to give timelines, because I see with y'all, when they give you guys a timeline, then I start getting emails when you said this is a timeline, whatever it is, because nobody can give you an accurate timeline. Every case is different. So because someone's case got a bona fide determination in 8 months doesn't mean the other person is going to get it in 8 months. Every single case is different, but we've seen bona fide determinations anywhere from 8 to 12 months, if you're eligible for one, or them saying you're not eligible for one. And with that, then you get a work permit, right? And then if your case, and then as far as trafficking cases, we are seeing somewhere between 18 to 24 months for decisions to be made in those cases. So it's definitely faster than VAWA cases, but understand that T visas and U visas also have annual caps per year that they can approve, which is why, you would see in a U visas take a really, really long time, because they have a shorter, a smaller amount of cap or applications they can approve in a year. So timeline varies. If I've been married for the past 5 years, but was living overseas for the most part, but I've been here for the past 2 months now, I'm finding out my husband has 2 kids since we married. I'm not sure the question you're asking. I think it cut off. So if you want to, if you have a pending I-751, do they look closely at how your taxes are filed? If your spouse does not want to file jointly, yes, they do look at your taxes closely in any kind of joint situation in an N-400, an I-751, or a marriage-based case. If your spouse is not doing a joint filing, are you doing married filing separately? Doing married filing separately is not going to penalize you, as long as you have other evidence to show that you and your spouse are together. Because outside of immigration, people that are married can choose to file their taxes separately for whatever reason, or whatever liability that one has that they don't want their spouse to take on, or vice versa. The key is you want to make sure that you're filing the right tax designation. So if you're married and you're not filing with your spouse, you really should be filing married filing separately. That said, you still want to have other supporting evidence to show that you have a genuine marriage, and your taxes is just one piece of the puzzle. I talk about this all the time. Immigration is not one evidence that you have or you're lacking. It is a totality of all the evidence that is presented. Is it likely true that these 2 people have a genuine marriage? And so that's how they look at it. Okay, guys, I got to jump off, but I will be back on live tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about the benefits of a trafficking visa and what that comes with. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.